I'm delighted to say our talkSPORT colleague Alex Crook joins us live on the show this morning. Alex, good morning. The Premier League's 14 remaining clubs are holding an emergency meeting today without the big six to discuss their next move. We heard from Farhad Moshiri. You probably heard it a moment ago, Alex. Farhad speaking exclusively to us on talkSPORT, saying, would Everton join up? Never, he says. I know you're across this meeting. What have you got for us?
Yeah, good morning, Jim. Good morning, Simon.
Morning,
I can see that comparison,
Alex.
By the way, to Ted Hastings. I'm never going to quite look at you in the same light again.
Wind
Simon,
your neck in, Crookie, because you look like Eric Hall.
Now, you've stolen that from Sam Matthews.
I have indeed.
Moving on, as you say, Jim, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but for me, yesterday was one of the most incredible days that I've ever experienced in my career in football journalism. I think today could get very lively as well. We know that Richard Masters is due to chair a meeting of the 14 clubs not part of this breakaway European Super League. That meeting due to get underway around about 11 o'clock this morning. The discussions will take place via video link. There'll be an opening address from Masters setting out the Premier League stance on the rebel clubs. And more importantly, maybe some of the legal avenues that are open to them. I've spent a lot of time, Jim, as you say, over the past 24 hours. I've been speaking to players, senior figures at some of those clubs. I can tell you, if the self-proclaimed Big Six were present at this meeting, I think it would be a very uncomfortable couple of hours for them. One chief executive I spoke to yesterday used the words violent anger and contempt when I asked how the likes of the two Manchester clubs, City, Chelsea and the rest were being looked upon by their fellow member clubs. What I can tell you is that the other 14 clubs who are going to take part in this meeting, they are absolutely united in trying to stop this Super League. They will do anything they can to prevent it from happening. And at this stage, I don't think expelling the Scum Six, I've heard them labelled as, from the Premier League is a route they're particularly keen.
That's what they've been
called,
down. Is it? The Scum Six.
I've heard that phrase, but I think they're aware that these 14 clubs, that if they were to try and expel the big hitters from the Premier League, they would be cutting off their noses to spite their faces in so many ways. I think that very much is the last resort. I think the first thing we will see today is a statement reiterating that the Premier League plan to evoke Rule L9, which basically prevents clubs from playing in any competition without prior written permission from the Premier League board. So I think that could be the first step that we will see after this meeting this morning.
I mean, Alex, stay with us. Simon, you cannot doubt the level of anger that is out there at the moment. They're calling them the Scum Six.
Honestly.
And you're saying the Super League will be accepted long term, not in this format, but in another format.
I'm first and foremost, a bunch of chief executives that are saying behind closed doors what they'll say to these people's faces. I've seen these chief executives, most of them are as weak as whatever. So they'll say this, and when they've got these six guys in a meeting, they'd say something different. But of course these 14 clubs are going to sit there and say, we're not happy with this, because the format is wrong and the methodology that's being deployed is wrong. But the end game to generate more revenue in football, unfortunately, whether people like it or they don't like it, the genie's out of the bottle. The football world is paying hundreds of millions of pounds for footballers, hundreds of millions of pounds for wages. Who's going to pay for it? Who pays for this? There needs to be more revenue. This mechanism is wrong, but if you then look at the idea of how we find a solution to this, we know we can't throw you out, but we're going to invoke a rule. Right, so we're going to invoke a rule that we know we can't implement, because if we do implement it, Sky are going to pull the broadcasting contract and take away our funding. You're in a very, very difficult position. And
I get that. But say you were going in there this morning as a chairman of one of the 14.
I listened to Steve Parish last night, who I don't like to listen to very much, but Steve Parish's attitude is extremely balanced, extremely pragmatic, which is not liking this, but we're a long way from having a full-on bun fight. There's a long way from sanctions, a long way. This is a Premier League chairman, not some silly little chief executive that works for a Premier League chairman that's got lots to say behind closed doors but will come out as anonymous. This is an owner of a football club, and his attitude is sanguine and realistic, because they know that there's going to be a horse trade and a change of direction, and they also know that losing 5 or 6 or 7 or 800 million pounds a year every year just because so they can pay the luxury of players' wages cannot go on.
But we just heard from another owner, and Alex heard him as well, Farhad Moshiri. He's talking about points deductions.
Sure, and they're talking about sanctions, and they're talking about that. If you're going to try and combat something, you don't turn around and say, "I'm going to tickle you to death with a feather duster," do you? You say, I'm going to do this to you, and I'm going to do that to you, and I'm going to have you for this, and I'm going to throw you out of Europe, and your players can't play in international tournaments. And when the dust settles and all the hysteria calms down, then you start to see what actually happens.
What do you expect out of this, Alex? How long do you think this will last, this meeting today, and what kind of mood do you expect come the end of it?
I think it will be a mood of defiance going into it. And as I say, obviously when you've got 14 clubs together, normally there would be a splinter in opinions, a divide. I don't get that impression. I think they're all singing from the same hymn sheet, despite what Simon is saying there. And if there are chief execs going into the meeting to represent their owners, that then clearly their owners will be sharing that belief. I think the government aspect is important. I think a lot of the clubs are putting their hopes on the Prime Minister, and they were welcome that the stance that he took yesterday, saying that they would do all in their power to stop this breakaway group. Obviously, there's a political agenda to these matters, and we know Boris Johnson. We know that he would love to be a hero and ride in on his white horse and save the national sport. I should say that government interference in football is something that FIFA don't like particularly. They do have the power to ban countries who fall foul of their non-interference rules. In 2008, only 13 years ago, Spain were threatened with expulsion from the Euros after the government became embroiled in the Spanish Football Federation's elections. Obviously, this is a different scenario. And one way the government could appease FIFA is by stopping the Big Six breaking away on the grounds of anti-competition laws, because as Simon will be well aware, in this country and in Europe, in any business having a closed shop scenario breaches these laws. So I think that they're going to rely on the government as well. I agree with Simon, this is not straightforward. This is very much their opening gambit, which is why we may well see a statement today, but I don't think it perhaps will be as strongly worded as maybe we're expecting over the weekend.